Commander Jake Martinez stared at the massive alien structure floating in space before him. The council station looked like a crystal mountain turned upside down, its surfaces gleaming with strange lights that hurt human eyes to look at directly. He had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, learning alien languages and customs, practicing diplomatic speeches until he could recite them in his sleep. Now that the moment had arrived, his stomach felt like it was full of ice. "Approaching Docking Bay 7, announced Amy Carter from the pilot seat. Her voice stayed steady even though Jake could see her hands shaking slightly on the controls. The UES Horizon moved slowly toward the alien station, following the exact path the Council had transmitted to them. Any deviation from the approved route would trigger automated defense systems that could turn their ship into space dust in seconds. Behind Jake, engineer Nick Thompson checked his instruments for the 100th time that day. The readings all showed normal, but Nick had warned them that human technology might not work properly near Council equipment. Something about energy fields that could scramble their computers without warning. Lisa Barnes sat at her communication station, wearing headphones that let her monitor dozens of alien radio frequencies at once. She had been quiet for the past hour, which usually meant she was hearing something that worried her. "Contact established," Lisa said suddenly. "They are giving us permission to dock, but they want us to shut down all our recording equipment first." She paused and listened to her headphones again. "They also want us to hand over all our weapons and any devices that can store information." Jake nodded. They had expected this. The Council did not trust any species that was not already under their control. Every first meeting followed the same pattern. According to the intelligence reports Earth had gathered from trading posts on the outer rim of known space. The Council would examine the new species, decide whether they were useful or dangerous, and then either accept them as junior members or reject them completely. The docking process took 2 hours. Council stations used docking systems that were designed for their own ships, not for the simpler technology that humans used. Amy had to manually adjust their approach 17 times before the docking clamps finally locked into place. When the airlock finally opened, a group of tall, thin aliens waited for them on the other side. The Council representatives looked like someone had stretched humans until they were twice as tall and half as wide. Their skin was pale blue and seemed to glow with its own light. They wore long robes that shifted colors as they moved, and their faces showed no expression at all. The leader stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. "I am Counselor Velthera of the 3rd Administrative Level. You will follow me to the examination chamber where your species will be evaluated for possible inclusion in the Galactic Council of Ordered Civilizations." Her voice sounded like wind blowing through metal pipes. "You will not speak unless asked a direct question. You will not touch anything. You will not make recordings of any kind." Jake wanted to ask about the examination process, but he remembered the briefing. First contact with the Council was not a negotiation. It was a test. He nodded and gestured for his team to follow him. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms filled with aliens from dozens of different species. Most of them looked busy, but Jake noticed that none of them seemed happy. They moved with the careful steps of people who were afraid of making mistakes. The examination chamber was a huge round room with a platform in the center. Hundreds of council members sat in rows around the platform, their glowing eyes focused on the 4 humans who stood in the spotlight. Jake felt like an insect under a microscope. High Counselor Zethkar sat on a throne that hovered above all the others. He was larger than the other council members, and his robes were pure white instead of the shifting colors the others wore. "Humans of the planet called Earth." Zethkar's voice echoed through the chamber. "Your species has requested membership in our council. We have studied your transmissions and your history. We have observed your behavior and your technology. We have reached a decision." Jake felt his heart pounding. This was the moment that would determine the future of humanity among the stars. Earth had spent enormous resources building the UES Horizon and training his diplomatic team. Billions of people were waiting to hear whether humans would be accepted into the galactic community or forced to remain isolated on their home planet. "Your species shows signs of advanced technology and basic intelligence," Zethkar continued. "However, your history reveals a fundamental flaw that makes you unsuitable for council membership. You are a violent and unpredictable species that solves problems through conflict rather than cooperation. Your planet has experienced over 3,000 wars in the past 5,000 years. You compete with each other instead of working together. You value individual achievement over collective harmony. Jake stepped forward. High Counselor, with respect, our history also shows our capacity for growth and learning. We have created art, music, literature, and science. We have organizations dedicated to peace and cooperation. We have learned to work together across national and cultural boundaries. Silence, Zethkar commanded. The word hit Jake like a physical blow, and he found himself unable to speak. Your protests only prove our point. A truly civilized species would accept our judgment without argument. Instead, you attempt to defend behaviors that any rational being would recognize as primitive and dangerous. Counselor Velthera stood up. The Council has voted unanimously. Earth will be placed under the silencing protocol. All human transmissions beyond your solar system will be jammed. All human ships attempting to leave your system will be turned back. Your planet will remain quarantined until your species evolves beyond its violent tendencies. How long will this quarantine last? Jake managed to ask before the silencing effect hit him again. Our experts estimate that your species will require approximately 3,000 to 5,000 years to develop proper civilized behavior, Zethkar replied. During this time, you will have no contact with other species. You will remain on your home planet and reflect on your failures. Perhaps your descendants will prove more suitable for membership in our ordered galaxy. The council members began filing out of the chamber. Their business concluded. Jake and his team were escorted back to their ship by guards who made it clear that they were no longer welcome on the station. As the UES Horizon pulled away from the council station, Jake stared at the massive structure that had just condemned humanity to thousands of years of isolation. But as they prepared to jump back to Earth, Lisa picked up something on her monitoring equipment. Hidden in the normal council communications, she detected coded messages between several alien species. The messages were encrypted, but Lisa had been trained to recognize patterns in any kind of signal. What she found made her blood run cold. "Commander," she whispered, "I think some of these council species are happy about our rejection, but not for the reasons they said. They are not afraid that we are too violent. They are afraid of something else entirely." President Helen Adams stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council, her face grim as she listened to Commander Martinez's report. The rejection by the Galactic Council had been expected, but the silencing protocol was worse than anyone had imagined. Earth was now cut off from the rest of the galaxy, trapped in their own solar system like prisoners in a cosmic jail. "The jamming field is already in effect," reported Dr. Kevin Walsh, Earth's leading expert on alien technology. "Any transmission we send beyond the orbit of Pluto gets scrambled into random noise. They have also positioned monitoring stations at the edge of our system to watch for any ships trying to leave." Maria Santos, the chief of operations for Earth's space program, pulled up a holographic display showing the solar system. Red dots marked the locations of council monitoring stations, forming a perfect sphere around Earth's territory. "We counted at least 50 stations, probably more that we cannot detect. Any ship that approaches the boundary gets a warning transmission telling them to turn back immediately. So we are truly alone," President Adams said quietly, "cut off from the galaxy just when we had started to explore beyond our own world." But Jake Martinez shook his head. "Not entirely alone, Madam President. During our time at the council station, Dr. Walsh made some interesting contacts." Dr. Walsh stepped forward and activated a secure communication device he had kept hidden during the official examination. The device looked like a simple metal sphere, but when he touched a hidden control, it projected the image of a strange alien creature that looked like a cross between a dolphin and an octopus. "Greetings, humans of Earth," the alien spoke in accented but clear English. "I am Merkala of the Merhani people. We have been listening to your radio transmissions for many years, and we find your species most fascinating." President Adams stared at the projection. "You can communicate with us despite the jamming field?" "The Council only jams transmissions that use standard galactic communication frequencies," Dr. Walsh explained. "But there are other species in the galaxy who are not part of the Council. They use different technologies that the Council either does not know about or chooses to ignore. The Merhani are one of several species that have been watching Earth from outside Council territory." The alien on the projection continued speaking. "The Council fears you, humans, but not for the reasons they told you. We have watched many species face the same examination you just experienced. Most are accepted into the Council and become obedient servants. But some species like yours are rejected because they show too much independence and creativity. Independence? Maria Santos asked. What do you mean? Another projection appeared, this one showing a crystalline being that looked like it was made of living glass. I am Sylvan of the Crystal People. We have studied your concept of democracy, where leaders are chosen by the people they govern. This idea is unknown to the Council, where power flows only from the top down. They fear that if other species learn about democracy, their control will be threatened. A third projection joined the first two, showing a being that seemed to be made of swirling gas held together by some kind of energy field. I am Gastel of the Nomad Fleets. Your people's ability to work together across different nations and cultures amazes us. The Council only knows how to control through fear and rigid hierarchy. They cannot understand cooperation that comes from choice rather than force. Dr. Rebecca Stone, Earth's chief physicist, leaned forward with excitement. Are you saying there are other species out there who think like we do? Many species, Mirkala replied, but most are too weak individually to challenge the Council. We have watched and waited for centuries, hoping that someday a species would emerge that could inspire others to seek freedom. President Adams felt a spark of hope for the first time since receiving the Council's rejection. What are you proposing? An alliance, Sylvan answered. Not for war, but for sharing ideas and technology. The Council's power depends on keeping species isolated from each other. But if we can create a hidden network of communication, we can share knowledge and support each other. Alex Chen, Earth's top engineer, had been listening quietly until now. How would such a network operate without being detected by the Council? Gastel's form shimmered as he spoke. Your species has developed quantum entanglement communication, yes? This technology can create instantaneous connections across any distance without using the electromagnetic spectrum that the Council monitors. The quantum entanglement research is still experimental, Dr. Stone said. We have only managed to maintain entangled particles for a few hours at most. We can help with that, Mirkala offered. Our people have developed biological quantum computers that can maintain entanglement for years. Combined with your understanding of quantum mechanics, we could create communication nodes that are undetectable by Council technology. Over the following weeks, a secret project began taking shape in hidden laboratories around Earth. Working with data transmitted by their new alien allies, human scientists developed a new type of communication device they called whisper posts. Each device was small enough to fit in a briefcase but could maintain quantum entanglement with similar devices anywhere in the galaxy. Captain Roy Davis, one of Earth's most experienced pilots, volunteered to lead the dangerous mission of placing these devices in strategic locations. Using Earth's most advanced stealth ship, he began making trips to asteroid fields and dead planets where the devices could be hidden from Council patrols. The first test of the network was both thrilling and terrifying. When the quantum link activated, Earth suddenly had access to communications from dozens of alien species scattered across the galaxy. Most of these species had never heard of each other. Kept isolated by the Council's policy of divide and control, Lisa Barnes, now promoted to head of alien communications, spent her days listening to transmissions from across the galaxy. What she heard painted a disturbing picture of life under Council rule. Species were assigned specific roles and forbidden from changing them. Innovation was discouraged unless it served Council purposes. Any group that showed signs of independence was either absorbed into the Council hierarchy or simply disappeared. They are not governing the galaxy, Lisa reported to President Adams. They are farming it. Each species is kept in its assigned place, producing whatever the Council needs, never allowed to grow or change. The most shocking revelation came from a species called the Cormini, who had been scientists before joining the Council 300 years earlier. Their representative, speaking through the hidden network, revealed that the Council had deliberately caused the destruction of 3 different civilizations over the past 1,000 years. Any species that developed technology the Council could not control was eliminated, the Cormini explained. The official records always blamed equipment failures or natural disasters, but we kept hidden archives. The Council has weapons that can destabilize a planet's core or trigger solar flares that destroy all technology on a world. Nick Thompson, who had been working on upgrading Earth's defenses, felt his blood turn cold. They could destroy us at any time and no one would ever know the truth. That is why we must be careful, President Adams said. We cannot challenge them directly, but perhaps we can do something they do not expect. Dr. Walsh had been studying the psychological profiles of Council species, trying to understand how their system of control worked. The Council maintains power through information control. They decide what each species knows about the galaxy and about each other. But what if we could change that? What do you mean? President Adams asked. What if we could share our ideas with other species in the galaxy, not through force or conquest, but simply by letting them know that there are other ways to organize society? Democracy, individual rights, scientific freedom, artistic expression. These concepts could spread naturally if people just knew they were possible. Maria Santos smiled for the first time in weeks. We become teachers instead of conquerors. Exactly, Dr. Walsh said. The Council fears our violence, but they should fear our ideas much more. High Counselor Zethkar stood before the massive display screen in the Council's central command chamber, watching streams of data flow past in patterns that had remained unchanged for over 2,000 years. For the first time in his long life, those patterns were showing anomalies that made his pale blue skin grow even paler with worry. Explain these readings to me again, he commanded Security Chief Colvex, who stood nervously beside him. The surveillance networks are detecting unusual communication patterns among our subject species, Colvex replied, his voice carefully controlled. Species that have been compliant for centuries are suddenly engaging in discussions about governance structures, individual rights, and technological development outside approved parameters. Zethkar turned away from the display, his white robes flowing around him like liquid light. Show me specifics. The display changed to show a planet called Velnara, home to a species of insectoid workers who had served the Council faithfully for 800 years. The Velnari had always been perfect subjects, following orders without question, and never developing technology beyond what the Council approved for their caste level. 3 days ago, the Velnari began holding what they call discussion groups, Colvex explained. They are asking questions about why their role in society cannot change, why they are not allowed to pursue scientific research, and why they have no voice in decisions that affect their planet. Impossible, Zethkar said flatly. The Velnari do not have the intellectual capacity for such concepts. Their brain structure is optimized for following instructions, not independent thought. That is what our xenobiologists said as well, Colvex agreed. But the evidence is undeniable. Furthermore, similar patterns are emerging on 17 other worlds. Species are developing concepts they call democracy, free speech, and scientific method. These terms do not exist in any of our approved languages. Counselor Velthera entered the chamber, her face showing the same pale worry that affected Zethkar. High Counselor, we have discovered the source of these dangerous ideas. Our analysis teams have traced the concepts back to transmissions that appear to originate from the silenced human homeworld. That is impossible, Zethkar repeated, but his voice carried less certainty than before. We have maintained a complete communication blockade around the human system for 6 months. Nothing gets in or out. The transmissions are not using standard communication frequencies, Velthara explained. Our technical teams believe the humans have developed some form of quantum-based communication that our jamming systems cannot detect. Worse, these transmissions are encoded in mathematical principles that any spacefaring species can understand. Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in millennia. Fear. Not fear of physical danger, but fear of losing control. The Council's power had always depended on keeping the galaxy species isolated from each other, each group knowing only what the Council wanted them to know. If species could communicate freely and share ideas, the careful order he had spent his life maintaining would collapse. Show me these transmissions, he demanded. The display screen, filled with symbols and equations that looked simple but carried devastating implications. Dr. Rachel Kim, working from her hidden laboratory on Earth, had created what she called idea viruses, compressed data packages containing human philosophical and scientific concepts, encoded in universal mathematical language that any intelligent species could decode. The first package contained the concept of democracy, the idea that people had the right to choose their own leaders and participate in decisions that affected their lives. The second explained individual rights, the principle that each being had inherent value and dignity that could not be taken away by others. The third introduced the scientific method, the process of testing ideas through observation and experimentation rather than accepting authority without question. These packages are spreading through our own communication networks, Velthara reported. They hide inside routine administrative data, invisible until they reach their destination and self-activate. By the time we detect them, they have already been downloaded and shared by hundreds of individuals. Kolvex pulled up another display showing the spread of the idea viruses across Council territory. Red dots marked locations where the concepts had appeared, and the pattern looked like a plague spreading across the galaxy. The contamination is accelerating. Each species that receives the ideas begins creating their own versions and transmitting them to others. What are the practical effects? Sethkar asked, though he dreaded the answer. The worker caste on Drillnada has organized what they call a labor union and is demanding better working conditions, Kolvex reported. The scientific caste on Cormini is requesting permission to research topics outside their assigned specialization. Oh, seriously? 3 entire species have submitted formal petitions to modify their membership terms with the Council. Modify their terms? Zethkar's voice rose dangerously. They are subject species. They do not negotiate terms. They claim they have the right to self-determination, Velthara said carefully. Another concept from the human transmissions. Admiral Betty Turner, working from Earth's Secret Command Center, coordinated with resistance cells that were forming across 12 different star systems. The human strategy was simple but revolutionary. Instead of trying to overthrow the Council through force, they would teach other species to overthrow themselves through understanding. The effects were more dramatic than anyone had expected. The aquatic Mirhani began sharing their advanced biotechnology with species who had been classified as too primitive to handle such knowledge. The crystalline Silvani started teaching other groups how to build quantum computers that could outperform anything the Council possessed. The nomadic Gastelli showed isolated species how to develop energy manipulation techniques that could free them from dependence on Council-controlled power sources. For the first time in galactic history, technological advancement was happening faster than the Council could track or control. Species that had been stuck at the same development level for centuries suddenly began making breakthroughs that leapfrogged thousands of years of normal progression. We have another problem, Kolvex announced grimly. Several species have developed cloaking technologies that our sensors cannot penetrate. When we send investigation teams to examine anomalous readings, we find empty space where our instruments detected ships and installations. Cloaking technology is impossible, Zethkar stated. We have the most advanced detection systems in the galaxy. Perhaps we did, Velthara corrected quietly. But these new technologies appear to operate on principles that our science does not recognize. The humans have shared not just ideas about government and society, but also new approaches to physics and engineering. The final blow came when Kolvex reported the most disturbing development yet. High Counselor, we have lost contact with our monitoring stations around the human solar system. Lost contact how? Zethkar demanded. They are still there, still functional, but they are no longer responding to our commands. Our analysis suggests that the humans have somehow taken control of our own equipment and are using it for their own purposes. Zethkar stared at the display screen, watching his carefully ordered galaxy dissolve into chaos. For 3,000 years, the Council had maintained perfect control through superior technology and absolute information dominance. Now a single species that they had dismissed as primitive and violent was destroying that control without firing a single shot. What do our strategic analysts recommend? He asked finally. Direct military intervention, Velthara replied immediately. We mobilize the fleet and eliminate the human homeworld before their influence spreads further. And the other option? Negotiation, Kolvex said reluctantly. We acknowledge that the situation has changed and attempt to find a peaceful solution. Zethkar considered both options. Military action would demonstrate the Council's power, but it would also prove to every species in the galaxy that the Council ruled through fear and violence rather than wisdom and justice. Negotiation would show weakness, but destroying an entire planet might turn the growing resistance into an open rebellion. Prepare the fleet, he decided, but do not attack yet. First, we will show these rebel species what happens to those who challenge the natural order. Fear has maintained our peace for 3 millennia. It will do so again. But even as he gave the order, Zethkar wondered if fear would be enough this time. The humans had given the galaxy something more powerful than weapons or technology. They had given them hope. The mining world of Cathara had always been a model of council efficiency. For over 1,000 years, the Cathari people had extracted precious metals from their planet's crust, shipping millions of tons of refined materials to council worlds without complaint. The workers reported to their assigned stations at the same time every day, performed their duties without question, and accepted their predetermined roles in the galactic order. That changed on a Tuesday morning when not a single Cathari reported for work. Supervisor Quintal, a council administrator from the bureaucratic caste, stood in the empty mining complex and tried to understand what had happened. The workers had not fled or hidden themselves. Instead, they had gathered in the planet's main city and were engaged in what they called a planetary assembly. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" Quintal demanded when he arrived at the assembly site. Thousands of Cathari sat in organized rows, discussing topics that made his scaled skin crawl with horror. "We are exercising our right to self-governance," replied Kethma, a worker who had spent her entire life operating excavation equipment. "We have formed representative committees to discuss how our planet's resources should be used and how our society should be organized. You do not have rights beyond those granted by the council," Quintal said firmly. "You are workers. Your function is to extract materials, not to question the system." "According to whose authority?" asked another Cathari. "We have learned that authority must come from the consent of the governed. Since we never consented to council rule, we are withdrawing our cooperation until new arrangements can be negotiated." Quintal felt his world collapsing around him. The concepts the workers were using did not exist in any approved language. More disturbing, they seemed to understand these ideas completely, as if they had been thinking about them for months. "Return to your duties immediately or face severe consequences," he threatened. "We will not return to work under the current system," Kethma replied calmly. "But we are willing to continue mining operations under a system where we have a voice in decisions that affect our lives and fair compensation for our labor." Similar scenes were playing out across council territory. The agricultural world of Ventari declared itself an independent farming republic and demanded the right to sell their crops to whoever offered the best prices. The research station of Quintel announced that its scientists would no longer restrict their studies to council-approved topics. Most shocking of all, 3 entire species formally petitioned to leave the council and govern themselves. Director of Intelligence Narkis presented his findings to the emergency session of the council leadership. His report painted a picture of coordinated rebellion unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The resistance operates through a communication network that appears and disappears faster than our tracking systems can follow, he explained. They use what they call cell-based organization, where small groups operate independently but coordinate their actions through shared principles rather than centralized command. "This is impossible," Councillor Velthara protested. "No species has the organizational capability for such sophisticated coordination without our technology. The techniques appear to have originated from the human homeworld," Narkis continued. "Our analysis of intercepted transmissions shows that humans have extensive historical experience with resistance movements and unconventional warfare. They are teaching other species tactics that we have never encountered." High Councillor Zethkar studied the reports with growing alarm. The rebellion was not following any pattern the council understood. Traditional uprisings could be crushed through superior firepower or controlled through economic pressure. But this resistance seemed to grow stronger the more the council tried to suppress it. "What makes these rebels so difficult to control?" he asked. "They practice what they call peaceful resistance," Narkis explained. "Instead of fighting our forces directly, they simply refuse to cooperate with our systems. When we threaten them with punishment, they accept the consequences without backing down. When we try to negotiate, they demand changes to the fundamental structure of council authority. Show them that defiance has consequences," Zethkar decided. "Activate the Fear Protocol." The Fear Protocol had been developed during the early days of council expansion as a way to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. A massive fleet would visit rebellious worlds and systematically destroy infrastructure, military installations, and government buildings. The destruction was carefully calculated to cripple resistance without killing enough people to create martyrs. Admiral Kotvek commanded the Fear Protocol fleet from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Order. Behind him followed 200 of the Council's most powerful warships, each one capable of sterilizing a planet's surface in hours. The fleet's first target was the mining world of Cathara, where the rebellion had started. "Attention workers of Cathara," Admiral Kotvek broadcast as his fleet entered orbit. "You have violated your service agreements with the Council. You will return to your assigned duties immediately or face the consequences of your defiance." The response came not from government officials or military commanders, but from ordinary workers gathered in their planetary assembly. "We hear your threats," Kethma replied through a simple radio transmitter. "We do not accept them. We have committed no crime except asking for the right to govern ourselves." "You exist to serve the Council's needs," Admiral Kotvek responded. "Your planet's resources belong to the galactic community, not to you." "Our planet belongs to us because we live here," Kethma answered. "No one has the right to rule others without their consent, no matter how powerful they claim to be." Admiral Kotvek had expected fear, pleading, or at least an attempt at negotiation. Instead, the rebels seemed genuinely puzzled by the idea that might made right. Their response was broadcast across the hidden resistance network, reaching millions of beings throughout Council territory. The orbital bombardment began at dawn. Council warships precisely targeted mining equipment, processing plants, and administrative buildings. The destruction was methodical and overwhelming, designed to show the cost of defiance. But something unexpected happened as the bombardment continued. Instead of cowering in terror, the Cathari began broadcasting messages of support to other rebel worlds. Instead of begging for mercy, they documented the destruction and transmitted it across the galaxy. Instead of surrendering, they declared that no amount of violence would make them accept tyranny. Colonel Steve Parker, coordinating Earth's information campaign from a hidden base in the asteroid belt, watched the broadcasts with a mixture of admiration and horror. The Council's brutality was being seen by species who had never questioned their authority before. "Are you getting this?" he asked Lisa Barnes, who was monitoring communication traffic across the galaxy. "Every transmission," she confirmed. "The Resistance Network is carrying the Cathara broadcast to over 300 worlds. Species that have never heard of each other are seeing what happens when anyone asks for freedom." The Fear Protocol's second target was the agricultural world of Ventari. The bombardment followed the same pattern. Precise destruction of infrastructure, carefully calculated to cripple without completely destroying. But again, the result was the opposite of what the Council intended. "This is President Helen Adams of Earth," came a transmission broadcast on every frequency the Resistance could access. "We see what the Council does to beings who ask for the right to govern themselves. We see how they respond to peaceful requests with violence and destruction. We ask every sentient being in the galaxy, is this the kind of civilization you want to live in?" The transmission included something that shocked Council analysts: complete historical records of humanity's own struggles for freedom. Earth broadcast not just their successes, but their failures, their wars, their mistakes, and their gradual progress toward better systems of government. "We show you our history not because we are perfect," President Adams continued, "but because we learned that freedom is worth fighting for, that democracy is possible even among imperfect beings, and that no one has the right to rule others without their consent." The most powerful part of the transmission was a simple message that spread across the galaxy like wildfire. "You have the right to govern yourselves. You have the right to make your own choices. You have the right to live free from fear. These rights exist not because anyone grants them to you, but because you are alive and intelligent beings deserving of dignity and respect." The Fear Protocol fleet continued its demonstration tour, destroying infrastructure on 12 worlds. But instead of crushing the rebellion, each bombardment seemed to strengthen it. Species that had been loyal to the Council for centuries began asking uncomfortable questions about the nature of authority and the source of political power. Hi, Counselor Zethkar watched the reports with growing desperation. The Fear Protocol had always worked before because subject species accepted that the Council had the right to rule them. But the human concepts of natural rights and self-determination had changed that fundamental assumption. "The rebels are not afraid of us," Counselor Velthara observed during an emergency meeting. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 straight days, and High Counselor Zethkar could see the fear in every delegate's glowing eyes. The fear protocol had failed completely, turning the Council's traditional show of strength into a demonstration of their own brutality. Worse, the rebellion was no longer limited to remote colonies and mining worlds. It had reached the heart of Council territory. The Velmari have formally withdrawn from the Council, reported Counselor Velthara, her voice barely above a whisper. The Velmari were one of the founding species of the Council, elder statesmen who had helped establish the Galactic Order 3,000 years ago. Their defection sent shockwaves through the remaining loyalist worlds. On what grounds? Zethkar demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They claim that the human concepts of self-determination and representative government align with their own pre-council traditions, Velthara replied. They say that joining the council 3 millennia ago was a mistake that abandoned their cultural values in exchange for security and stability. Security Chief Colvex entered the chamber with the expression of barely controlled panic. High Counselor, we have a more immediate problem. 17 additional species have declared independence in the past 48 hours. Our remaining member worlds are split into 3 factions. Hardliners who support immediate military action, moderates calling for negotiations, and a growing number who are secretly communicating with the Rebel Alliance. Zethkar felt the foundations of his world crumbling beneath him. The Council had always maintained power through unity and the appearance of inevitable authority. If member species could simply choose to leave, the entire system would collapse within months. What are the humans doing? He asked, dreading the answer. General Tony Clark has arrived at the edge of our territory with Earth's first interstellar fleet, Colvex reported, but the ships are not configured for warfare. Our analysis indicates they are rescue and aid vessels, designed to help refugees and provide humanitarian assistance. Refugees from what? From us, Velthara answered quietly. The human fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies that Earth stands ready to help any species seeking freedom from Council rule. They are not offering conquest or domination, they are offering partnership. The final blow came when Colvex delivered the most devastating news yet. High Counselor, the humans have called for a galactic assembly in neutral space. They want representatives from every species in the galaxy to gather and discuss what they call a Charter of Sentient Rights. And how many species have agreed to attend this illegal gathering? 847 confirmed so far, Colvex replied, including most of our current member worlds. Zethkar stared at the numbers in disbelief. In 3,000 years of Council rule, there had never been an independent gathering of more than a dozen species. The humans had organized the largest interstellar assembly in galactic history in less than 3 weeks. Dr. Kevin Walsh stood before the massive gathering of alien delegates, representing more genetic and cultural diversity than had ever been assembled in one place. The meeting was being held in the space between galaxies, far from any world that could claim territorial authority. Behind him, the flags and symbols of nearly 1,000 different civilizations created a tapestry of incredible beauty and complexity. We gather today not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals, Dr. Walsh began, his words being translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Earth did not call this assembly to rule over you, or to replace one tyranny with another. We called it because we believe that every intelligent being has the right to determine their own destiny. The Charter of Sentient Rights that Dr. Walsh presented had been created not by humans alone, but through collaborative input from dozens of species working through the Resistance Network. The document established principles that many civilizations had forgotten during their long subjugation to Council rule. The right to self-governance, the right to pursue knowledge and artistic expression, the right to form voluntary associations with other species, and the fundamental principle that political authority must derive from the consent of the governed. This charter does not create these rights, Dr. Walsh explained. These rights exist because you exist. They cannot be granted by governments or taken away by force. They are part of what makes you intelligent, conscious beings deserving of dignity and respect. The debate that followed lasted for days. Species that had been isolated from each other for centuries discovered that they shared common values and aspirations. The aquatic Merhani found common ground with the crystalline Silvani on the importance of scientific freedom. The nomadic Gastelli agreed with the agricultural Ventari about the right to control their own resources. But the most powerful moments came when former council loyalists stood up to speak. The Tekmari, who had served as administrators for over 1,000 years, announced that they were abandoning their privileged position in favor of equality with other species. The Quilnoth, master engineers who had built much of the council's infrastructure, declared that they would share their knowledge freely instead of hoarding it for the ruling elite. "We choose freedom over security," announced the Tekmari representative. "We choose the unknown future over the certain oppression of the past." When the vote was finally called, the result was overwhelming. 789 species endorsed the charter, establishing the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds. Only 58 species voted against it, most of them core council worlds whose economies depended entirely on the labor of subject species. High Councilor Zethkar watched the vote tallies appear on his screen and knew that his age was ending. 3,000 years of careful order, destroyed by ideas that spread faster than any plague and proved more powerful than any weapon. "What are your orders, High Councilor?" Councilor Velthara asked quietly. Zethkar considered his options. He could order the council fleet to attack the assembly, but that would only prove the rebels right about the council's true nature. He could try to negotiate, but what was there to negotiate when the rebels demanded nothing less than the end of the system that had given his life meaning? "Dissolve the council," he said finally. "If we cannot rule through consent, then we will not rule at all." "High Councilor, you heard me. Send a message to all council worlds that the Galactic Council of Ordered Civilizations is hereby dissolved. Let these rebels try to govern themselves without our guidance. When chaos and war inevitably follow, perhaps they will appreciate what they have lost. But Zethkar's bitter prophecy would not come to pass." Admiral Jake Martinez, standing on the bridge of the UES horizon in the same place where humanity's journey to the stars had begun, watched ships from hundreds of worlds working together to establish supply lines, communication networks, and mutual defense agreements. "It actually worked," Amy Carter said with wonder in her voice. She was now Captain Carter, commanding her own ship in Earth's growing fleet. "We changed the galaxy without firing a shot." "We gave them what they needed most," Jake replied, watching alien children from a dozen species playing together in the observation deck of a refugee transport. "We gave them hope that things could be better." The first session of the Galactic Federation Council took place 3 months later on a newly constructed space station, built through the voluntary cooperation of 50 different species. The station itself was a symbol of what the galaxy could accomplish when beings worked together by choice, rather than compulsion. President Helen Adams, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Federation, looked out at the assembly hall filled with representatives from over 800 worlds. Each species contributed their unique perspective and abilities to solving the challenges facing their diverse civilizations. "The galaxy is no longer silent," she observed to Dr. Walsh, who had been elected as the Federation's first Secretary General. "It speaks with 1,000 voices, all free to express their own truths. And that," Dr. Walsh replied, "is exactly as it should be." The age of enforced compliance was over. The age of voluntary cooperation had begun, and somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, the idea of freedom continued to spread, carrying with it the promise that no being would ever again have to choose between security and liberty, because they could have both. The Council had tried to silence Earth, but instead they had awakened a galaxy, and that awakening would echo through the cosmos for generations to come, a testament to the power of ideas and the unbreakable spirit of those who refuse to be ruled without their consent.